Welcome to the Parent Yap, a podcast by the Joy Parenting Club. I'm Maddie, and I am here with Emily and Michael Perry from Maple. Michael, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to yap with you today about fatherhood.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here to chat about fatherhood. I'm excited to be here.
Michael, or otherwise known as MP, to your closest and nearest and dearest, do you want to share maybe just a little intro about yourself personally as a father and as a founder, and tell us a little bit about Maple, and then we can dive in to chat more about our topic of the day.
My name is Michael, and I have a 3 soon-to-be 4-year-old son and a newly minted 6-year-old son. Been married to my lovely wife we've been together for 20 years, married for 13 years, have a nephew and niece, have a very beautiful family that I'm surrounded by here in Santa Barbara, California, and feel very fortunate about that. And outside of spending time with my family and raising my sons, I do run a company called Maple that is trying to help others do the same thing and care for their families. And we built a platform that really enables working parents to best share family responsibilities in the home. Probably most known for our family calendar, meal planner, and inbox, but we also provide a to-do system and shopping list and organizational tooling as well. And very proudly just named one of Apple's top 7 apps last week for working parents. So just working hard and staying quiet and keeping my head down and yapping when I can to my kids.
Congrats. That's a huge deal. I feel like it is so well deserved. Maple is an incredible app for working parents in general, but working parents for sure, because the juggle is crazy. The mental load is crazy. And the use cases are almost endless, I would say, for how you can organize your family on Maple.
Yeah, it's been a really extraordinarily hard company to build. Far has exceeded the challenge that I've ever taken on. We've been very, I think, adamant about building for parents. And I think lean very heavily into a family first philosophy in terms of how the company is shaped, and just like our own moral compass in terms of how we treat the team and how we want them to spend time with their families. And in a startup environment, that's really hard to create those lines individually, but really to set a company culture around that is super hard. And we've abided by it. And then, I think in today's world and all of its fast moving pace is just trying to have the discipline of understanding who our audience is and what they need. And really, I think living and dying by being a mobile app has been wild and hard in a space that has, I think really introduced new forms of hardware to the home. And not really entering into that world intentionally has been an interesting journey. And so, I think when they're all vanity things, you're not a good or bad product at Apple doesn't name you in the top 7. I had my former boss used to say, I worked in a publicly traded company, and if the stock went up 10%, you're not 10% better that day. If the stock was down 10%, you're not 10% worse that day. And I always think about these moments in kind of the same light. We didn't get better overnight just because of some acknowledgement, but it does feel like the hard work kind of pays off a little bit. So we bask in it when we can.
Yeah, you take the win and learn and grow and all things.
Yeah.
We are leading up to Father's Day, which is exciting. We wanted to yap with you, Michael, about being a father and thinking about fatherhood as a personal and a professional. It feels as though you embody a lot of, the personal ethos in your personal life and in your work life and as a founder. And so we're going to chat with Michael today about his own dad journey, talk a little bit about that. And we'll just talk a little bit about what it means to be a dad in 2025.
All right, Michael, I would love to start with something that you said when we were chatting leading up to this podcast, and it is that men are trying. And I would love to chat about that because I do think in 2025, dads kind of have a bad rap. And for sure, there are dads out there who maybe aren't as evolved in their fatherhood thinking as you are. And so that bad rap might be warranted. But I love the notion that the dads are out there doing their best. And I would love to hear kind of your philosophy around that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that so much. And I know it's a bit of a controversial thought. I don't really feel like it should be, I think in a lot of ways, when I started this company, I knew so little about the state of parenting. I really feel fortunate that I've gotten to be a student of this, because I do think that parenting is our life's work. I do think it is our life's purpose. And I think one clear theme that has remained is that a lot of fathers that I speak to feel, I want to be very restricted to how I frame this, but um, like hopeless in some way, because I think that they do. And I feel that there is this trend, like we are a generation of transition as a parenting class. More moms are in the working class ever than before. Plus, more fathers are caring about their children at home ever than before. And I don't see this trend line going backwards. We are a transitioning generation of parents. And that means that there has to be a lot of grace on both sides, which means that, for mothers, we have to reframe what expectation looks like at home, because a mom's world is completely different today than it was in any other period. We also have to reframe and understand that dad's trying to step into a role he's never done before.
Yeah.
And what I mean by never done before is that, my mother will be quick to remind me that my father never changed his diaper. My my great grandfather never changed a diaper. And that narrative actually never changed, right? Most of the men in today's world, they actually have changed the diaper. And like, they actually do want to care, but they're now for the first time trying to figure out how to do a job, but maybe didn't have the right role model previously for this current world. And they're trying to meet their wife's needs in terms of being a better partner in their relationship as well. So they're, for the first time, having to care for their children because they have the desire to do so. And they're also having to understand that their wife is equally, or their life partner is equally in the workforce, and that they're trying to figure out how to manage that as well. And they feel, I think, collectively like they're falling up short everywhere. And I think that that's a really hard way of framing some beautiful progress, when there's this kind of constant overarching reminder that life is really, really hard for mom, because it is. Hard for mom. And that part of what makes life hard for mom is that she's not getting the support at home that she needs. And there's correct to that too, right? And I'm not neglecting anything in this narrative, but there has to be somebody, which I've decided to be a little more vocal about, to say, hey, you're right. But there's some guys out there that are trying, and likely their sons will now have the role model that they will actually show up a bit different in their marriage. They'll continue to elevate the craft of fatherhood. But we have to pay some homage and respect that there is a new effort taking place. And I feel really sad for a lot of dads, to be frank. Like, I've had beers with friends who are like, they feel like absolute fucking failures. And that's crazy to think that they're probably the best version of fatherhood ever.
Totally. Right.
And they feel like they're bad husbands, and they feel like they're bad dads. And it's like, the fact that they're even acknowledging that they want to do more and they don't know what to do. I just think that there's a huge room to be like, man, work into it.
I wonder, to your point, like the progressing of the male, from his father and his father and his father, like, well, for women, like, what am I learning from my mother? And am I parenting in a different way than I was parented? And am I expecting differently than my mother expected of my father?
Like my mother and my aunt were waitresses, and my aunt lived with my grandmother, and I'm a very large women-led family. Once sit, at the table and smoke their cigarettes and complain about my dad, because my dad, my aunt's brother. I became very aware at a young age that, like, being in an echo chamber is like absolutely the worst thing for your mental relationship with somebody. And so I actually think that part of why I'm actually standing up and talking more about, like, we need to be more empathetic to men, is that, like, I actually see this echo chamber happening all over again, which is like, the broad communication is, your life at home is hard because your husband doesn't care. Like, that's like thematically, like, big ticket, big clickbait.
Yeah.
Like, thing. And I'm like, wait, your husband does care. Your husband just doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. But if you go around and you are explicit with how you communicate, like, I would say in a lot of cases, the echo chamber is such a dangerous place because that's where people settle. And it's this
Yeah.
crazy. I really feel like we're on the tip of some unhealthy wildfire. And I just think to myself, like, why would we not actually all just grab a hose?
You heard it here first, folks.
Grab the hose, baby. I think that is such an interesting way to have this conversation because for moms, it's something we've been experiencing for more generations than dads have. And so we are back in the workforce more than ever. And having those experiences of like, you're never good enough at work, you're never good enough at home. And I think it's so great that dads are starting to have that conversation and opening up the conversation to each other to say like, wow, I wouldn't expect those conversations to be happening over beers with a lot of the dads I know. So I love to hear that it is happening.
It is I think it's happening with your own spouse. I think that like it's a very common conversation. And I think that there's a lot of guilt. I think there's some odd shame because I think that men are prideful. And no one likes to admit that they're not able to step up and care for their family, right? No one wants to be like, I'm letting my wife down, I'm letting my kid down. No one wants to say that.
Right.
And, I think that we started this call by saying that, we acknowledge fathers and June. It's also a mental health month for men. It's important to recognize that we're taking a day to celebrate someone who identifies as a father doing their job. It's also important to recognize that there's a lot of men who are quiet and not doing so well. Often by myself included.
Right.
Right. I've been doing my own mental health for the last
Yeah.
20 weeks. And I think it's just like important to recognize that, like, I don't think it's never as good as people think. It's never as bad as men are not as bad as they're being painted out to be. And I genuinely wish that, and I said this on a podcast recently, and I think it's a great thought for this audience as well, is like entrepreneurship is greatly celebrated as we know, right? If you even fail your company, you are met with a lot of empathy. It's like, this shit is hard. This is a hard
Right.
life, hard job, very stressful. I wish it on nobody. Da, 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 da. I've never met anybody not be relatively empathetic to an entrepreneur. They are given a lot of forgiveness for blowing shit up.
Yeah.
For some reason, with parenting and the struggles and the sleeplessness and trying to figure it out, it's treated as this rite of passage, where it actually needed to be met with a tremendous amount of empathy to say, this is so hard. And we applaud and we're trying and like hang in there. And like, if we actually gave parents the same tonality that we gave entrepreneurs, I feel like this whole conversation would be met so differently because we stop identifying people as mom or dad, but we identify them as parents, right? And if we identify people in a more universal label as a parent, then we recognize everyone is trying really hard at something that really does feel on some days impossible to be perfect at. And let's wish that I don't want to be seen as a father. I want to be seen as a parent. I don't want to be seen as a husband. I want to be seen as a co-founder of life. I don't want to be seen as a CEO. I want to be seen as a founder of me. Like, I just think that we are mislabeled and mistitled greatly. And that creates just so much division unnecessarily against one another. And we need that, like Emily and I are both founders. We live in different parts of the country. We're different gender. We're different everything. But like, I bet you that we're treated empathetically similar.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's so interesting. First of all, you said the phrase, the craft of fatherhood. And I love that you think of it that way. It feels like implicitly a process and not sort of a title, I guess, right? It really is a thing you're working at. Actually, it was yesterday morning. I want your thoughts on this. Now you're acting as my marriage counselor, just for a quick. So I had to I had to leave the house early. My son was in a play, and I was helping them to set up, so I couldn't do the lunches and the getting ready and all of the morning routine. And so my husband did it. And he was making their lunches and whatever with the chicken nuggets. And I said, Nick, thank you so much for doing this. And he said, why are you thanking me? And I appreciate it. I appreciate that you're doing this. And he said, well, this is this is just the way it should be. Like, I should be. You shouldn't have to ask me to do it. But I guess I wonder sort of like, is that progress? Is that a step? Like, how does that interaction fit in the way that you think of like a partnership? Because I feel like often it's a mom has to ask or get her spouse to do a thing, like fill out a form, pick someone up. It's often that's the sort of like the construct. And in this case, he was sort of saying, yeah, but that shouldn't be that. And I guess just sort of the idea that this is a mom first job with a husband kind of stepping in as a substitute.
Yeah, see, I hate that line of thought to the extent that, like I believe this deeply in the core of who I am. I didn't marry an employee.
Oh, say it again.
It doesn't work for me, and so like I don't treat her as an employee. And I think that like I would expect for her to treat me as a co-founder of what we're creating together at home. And so like I don't know. I like when I know that my wife is feeling it, like it's feeling hard, and I like when she knows that I think it's feeling hard. And I think I like being met with a hug or a high five versus like sometimes I think it's not what you say; it's always how you say it or how you frame it, and it can feel so for someone to be like, "Thank you for doing that for me," versus just like, "We have this covered. We are getting through this very rigorous, hard day." And like I think that all behaviors compound into something greater. Like my wife and I. We're all works in progress, by the way, to the same extent where sometimes I'll say something that is completely unfair and show that, say, well, why am I solely responsible for this? And I have to take a step back and recognize that she's not. And it would be like if she went grocery shopping, me being like, thank you for doing modeling. Fuck you. Like, why are you doing the grocery shop? I think it's just a matter of like how it's framed. Like, I think that there could be gratitude for someone having my back. And that I think can come out differently. I think that with your husband's response was personal. I think that is progress. I think he's saying like, why are we thanking you for taking care of our children?
Right. And I meant it in a gratitude kind of, and so
beautiful to have gratitude home helping you. I think it's beautiful I think it's beautiful to acknowledge when someone is caring and loving for your children, whether they're your spouse, your in-law, your whoever. I think, welcoming support for yourself to get you when you're trying to manage a family and manage a career is a beautiful acknowledgement. I don't think that should be frowned upon. I love that your husband also is like taking care of our kids. These are children too. I can make some lunches. And I think that there's nothing wrong in either scenario, just depending on how it's delivered and handled.
All right. That was well said. And thank you. And
like, I feel better.
Like, I actually feel really bad. I didn't mean it bad with you.
I would love to talk about kind of the converse, because I'm a single mom. I'm a divorced mom. So you can probably get an idea of what my experience with fatherhood has been based on that. What would you say to the dads who don't have the same mindset that you have or that Nick has? Nick is Emily's husband, who do sort of see their wives as the primary caregivers, even if they are working outside of the home. So like you have equal careers, but the parenting falls to the mom. And when the conversation comes up that is like, hey, I'm fucking drowning here. Like, can I get some support? It's like, well, I got to do this, this, and this first, and then I can deal with fatherhood.
Well, this is always such a tough question because I think that it's impossible to fairly articulate on an individual level what's going on in their world. Broad stroke, I think a lot of men, who I'm going to say this very respectfully and sensitively, who deprioritize the need to be a father. I think those are the men that unfortunately end up spending the back half of their life with a lot of regret.
Yeah.
And typically when I see men that I'm close with prioritizing their work over their wife, prioritizing their work over their children, prioritizing drinking beers and golfing over spending Saturdays with their kids. Again, I like to go surfing. I think there's a difference between like creating space versus prioritization. I often, if I feel comfortable in that with the individual, I do like to gently remind them that their son isn't going to remember how big their paycheck was. They're going to remember, were they there for them? Did they show up for them? Your son is likely not going to see a shrink because you did not take them to Disneyland. Your son is going to be seeing a therapist someday because you didn't shove them in the right capacity. And so I think that, it's hard on the day in and day out because there's so much social pressure. There's so much hardship of life to be able to put food on the table and these things of that nature. I live with poor, and I still have immense gratitude for the sacrifices my parents made. But really, my gratitude is how they showed up for me.
Right.
And I don't know. I just think that sometimes people lose sight of what really matters. I know for a fact that I don't have a lot of life experience. I'm only 39, so I'm not really ultimately the sage person to be asking these questions to.
Like, we are all still growing. Shifting that perspective is awesome.
We're only 39.
You're right. We all have to give ourselves grace.
I don't think we all have to give ourselves grace. I think that there will be always a little bit of like, I wish I could have, part of life, I think, is just being at peace with the state of things.
Totally.
And I just think that the more you invest in your children, the more likely you're going to be at peace in the end. I don't think that whether Maple makes or not, maybe laying on my deathbed, being like, I've had a really successful company. I had an exit. I've had these, and I can tell you right now, for certain, there's no greater feeling. There's no greater sense of accomplishment than the face of your child when they see you showed up for their musical or play. And it trumps being on the front of a Forbes article, right? So I just think that like we have to find people with like-minded priorities and values and then have empathy for those that do not.
Right.
You don't think anyone's going to ever, 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 ever regret placing their children first, and those that do not certainly will. Like, I feel bad. Like, I'm like, why would you miss it? Like, this is probably in the physical experience of this version of yourself. This will be the most, I know when I'm 85, if I live that long, I will look back and I will give up every single thing I have right now to be exactly in this place of time with these people.
Yeah.
Right. So if we know that, why would you just not be all in right now?
I think so much of it for parenthood and fatherhood and motherhood in different ways is the societal pressure, and is if you have a big job, you have to be showing up to the office every day. And if you work for a company that has that culture and you want to abide by that, that becomes your priority because you are feeling that pressure. And I would love to just talk a little bit more about how we can support the dads, to how we can have more empathy for the dads who are not in the space yet to prioritize fatherhood over their own lives. Because from personal experience, I started this by saying I'm a single mom. My ex-husband has become a way, way, way better dad since we separated because he had no choice. We have the kids 50-50. So when he has them, he has to show up fully. And it's been incredible to see. I feel very lucky in that regard. So how can we have more empathy for dads who aren't where you are yet? What are some of the things that we can do, sort of macro and micro, to support this progress?
Well, I'll start. Well, I want to answer this in 3 ways.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to commend you for, it sounds like being a super excellent mom. And, I think that there's a lot of versions of single parenting. There's a lot of women who are single parents inside of a marriage. My mother would arguably say that she was one of those women. I would unfortunately have to agree with that in a lot of ways. So I have a lot of empathy for that. And your children are, you said you have a son or a daughter?
I have 2 little girls.
They're very lucky to have you. And
Interesting.
I would imagine to some extent that, the hard thing is, I think the state of fatherhood is very much probably a bit of an awakening moment, like smoking a cigarette.
Mhm.
And that sounds awful to say, but follow with me for a moment. you can forever and a day be told that cigarettes will kill you, that bad habits will kill you. And by the end of your life, if you have lung cancer, there's people always like, why did I ever smoke?
Yeah.
Right. I think fatherhood, there's a group of people that have been like, oh, I am not going to smoke cigarettes.
Yep.
Increasingly by each generation, if you map back, generationally, people smoke less cigarettes. So
Yeah.
I think the problem is that there's a lot of men who are sitting in that cloud of smoke and that addiction to what the cigarette brings. And for a lot of men, the prioritization, because society has allowed it to be the prioritization, or society hasn't given the breathing room for mothers to have this as the prioritization. It's done the opposite. It is like career first, money for whatever the things are that keep them going. But at some point you have this awakening and you realize that all those things erode away quite quickly. You can make money all the time.
Yeah.
It comes in. You can get fit in your 40s. You can get fit in your 50s. You can pick up a hobby in your 60s. Your small children are only small children for a small amount of time. Your opportunity to show up and leave your impression on them, that window of opportunity is a small amount of time. If your children don't respect what you have to say at 8, they're certainly not going to respect what you have to say at 28, right? And so it's unfortunate because some men they will miss their chance at being that guy. I will never be a great entrepreneur. I will have no legacy at the end of my life, but my children will absolutely cherish the man I was to them. And for me,
I love that.
for being their everything. I'd rather be a legend to them than a legend to some person who's downloading some piece of technology that I'm never going to meet my entire life. Right. And so I think that the pendulum is swinging. I think more men are starting to realize that. And I think it just takes a long time to generationally pass. At the macro level, I think it's that change. I also think, sadly, to the point you kind of said earlier, which is, if you go to the 50s, 4 out of 10 women 4 out of 10 households had dual working parents. 16% of women or so were in the workforce. You go to the 60s, that number increases. 70s, that number increases. 80s, that number increases. There's a million great women out there that have been role models who've led the charge, who have shaped the way that society views feminism, womanhood. There's a lot of powerful people out there. 2 of them are sitting on this call right now for trying to use their voices to enhance motherhood, right? There's not mainly one good public figure man. They don't even struggle.
I feel stumped.
You struggle to find one public figure. I'm not talking about your husbands or
Right.
or that might have been good. I'm talking about at a public macro level of visibility. Who are you like? Son, be like that guy.
That guy.
Be that guy, right? That guy doesn't exist. He's
Right.
So I've taken in my own home, I've recognized that the only person I think my sons can look to is me.
Yeah.
And, that I just be the way that it is for them. And I hope that by the time they become men, there's better male leadership in the world who sets a different tonality and reestablishes family first principles at household level, company level, government level. So that's the easiest way I can do it.
I love that. Thank you.
Can I follow up to that? I wonder how you've changed as an entrepreneur and as a founder and as a leader of a company since having children, because my guess is the things that you described of being present at home and being a role model and being there for your children could only contribute positively to your work life. And so I wonder if you see that changing yourself over time or how you think that one sort of leads into the other.
Yeah. Well, I do think that people can have rebirths. And I do think I'm on a second or third version of myself.
Right.
And I think that that's an important thing to acknowledge. And I'm sure there's oftentimes people who listen to these podcasts who worked for me at previous companies or Shopify, and they're like, "Ooh." Unfortunately, again, that's why I've come to peace that I'm not some oracle. Like, I'm a 39-year-old guy that's going to be making lots of mistakes. And I think the greatest privilege is acquiring some level of information in a clear sight of line as soon as you can and revisiting it frequently. right? You don't want to be the same person every 10 years. I think that, when I was younger and I was an entrepreneur, I think also like being born with very little, your motivations are super different. And I just remember setting goals, and all of those goals were very monetary. It was like, I need to make my first $1 million by 30. I need to make my first $10 million by 40, $100 million by 50. Everything was about creating financial freedom for myself and thinking that success was associated to those financial benchmarks. I think that you could be a very rich man and be incredibly unsuccessful. If your children have no interest in you and you have $100 million in the bank, you failed as a man.
Yeah. That's as poor as it gets.
You're a poor man at the end of the day. If you're dying alone in a big house, something went incredibly wrong. And so I think that, like, for me, I had a lot of success at 30. I sold my company 3 days before my 30th birthday. And I thought that all of those things were going to make me feel a certain way. They made me feel way worse. My wife and I had a long, hard journey of having a child. And it took truly her strength and sacrifice for us to have a child. And I just remember holding my son for the very first time. And I remember just feeling like the entire air had been sucked out of the room. And I remember, like, I don't even remember seeing other people in the room. My whole world became centered on this boy. And I remember thinking, like, almost in near real time, I had found my purpose in life. I just was like, this is it.
So special.
It is.
And I don't know, I'm just like, everything in my life now is, my sons are my guiding light. I treat people the way I hope people would treat my sons. I treat my people the way I hope that my children are given grace. I just try to live a life of kindness, because, like, I couldn't imagine anyone fucking with my kids.
I know. I warned everybody in our first episode that I would cry a lot. So now 1-for-1 crying with a guest, but I think that is so incredible, because after I say this hippy dippy thing, we can move on to Emily's question. But I think that is like the root problem in the world. It's like the Earth's virus, is that people, don't abide by the golden rule, like do unto others. And I think if we could all lead with kindness, whether it's in parenthood, at work, in our relationships, we would be so much better off individually, in family units, in working units, and globally. So I really appreciate that perspective.
You said how they would treat I would treat someone how I hope they would treat my children, which is
Right.
a beautiful way to say it. All right, so I'm going to rephrase my question, and it's potential is for us to close, because I think it speaks more to the legacy that you are hoping to leave as a human, and not to be morbid about it all, but what will that look like for your family? What will that look like for your children? How will they remember your time together? What special things will they sort of brand as a dad thing or as a family thing in the Perry house? What does that look like for you? Can you share a few little pieces of routine or tradition that you've created for your family?
Well, when you have a 6 and I'm going to say almost 4-year-old, I would like to think that answer is not entirely clear, because we have a lot of years ahead.
A lot of things to go from here.
We're really make those dad moments and those memorable moments. This is going to sound crazy, but I hate the word legacy, to the extent that I think that there is a lot of vanity in that. Like, you expect a lot of people to remember you. I don't think anyone's going to fucking know me at the end of my life. I think that there'll be 2 or 3 people who know me incredibly well, and that will be my wife and my children. And God willing, I die before she does. And I think that my grandchildren will have a good sense of who I am if I'm blessed enough to live a long life. And I think for my family, for my umbrella, because I think I've been a relatively good son. I'd like to think I've been a decent brother. I've tried my hardest to be a good uncle to my niece and my nephew. I would like to think if you ask any single one of those people, and they would tell you right now, horseshit for fact that they are the priority in my life. Not that my family is the priority in my life, but that they are the priority in my life. And that my sons can hold their head up high and know that that their dad chose them, that their father chose them. That will be my legacy to my sons. That will be their memory. That will be the memory my sons have of me, is that they know for a fact that I chose them.
That's amazing. That's literally all you hope for as a parent, is that at the end of your life, your kids say, damn, they did it all. I want to like sob a little. Michael, have you ever considered making like a class, I mean this seriously, like a fatherhood? There's so many things out there for moms, for new moms who are like coming into motherhood for the first time. Endless courses that range from like really logistical stuff to kind of this philosophical, dare I say, emotional conversation that we're having now. I don't know of anything like that for dads.
Honestly, I'm not the person for that. I'm in it. I think that, the problem with, the problem that I see out there is that like, we actually think that we need, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with seeking guidance to improve your skill sets as a parent. And I want to preference that. Because we do, like, I do think it's a crap. I do think that if you don't have the soft skills to communicate with your partner, you should work on yourself to communicate better. I do think that relationships are a tremendous amount of hard work, and they're the best part of life.
Yeah.
Raising your children, the hard thing about raising kids, you have 2 girls, I have 2 sons, Emily has kids, like, they're all so different. They all need a parent to show up in a different way. My son Leander, he comes in my office, and I have this record player that my great grandfather, that I inherited. It's been in my family for a long time, and we put albums on. He sits on the ground. He's highly sensitive, and he just wants my attention.
Yeah.
And that's so different than my son Solomon, who just wants me to wrestle and be physical. It's just, and so I don't know. I really struggle with like the parenting guidance that's out there, because I don't think that there's this great like silver bullet brushstroke way to parent. I think it's like, you have to be willing to be a little bit more in tune with what your kid needs, and then you have to be willing to do the really hard work to be that person. My son's like, "Why are you on your phone? He's 6." I'm like, "You're right." Like, my youngest son's younger as shit. He's just like throwing around. If I'm like working while he's skateboarding on our phone, he doesn't care. My eldest son, he's like, "Look at me.
You're not listening, mommy. I'm like,
Oh, you're right. I don't need some other man to be like, listen to your son." I'm like,
yeah.
I really do the hard work to build the discipline to be a better father to my son.
Yeah.
Like, every single person out there knows, probably subconsciously knows to some extent, what they need to do for their child.
You would hope.
If you can't, and there's professionals, doctors, who you can sit down with and get guidance and get services. This isn't a drop shipping class. This is, this is, I think the beautiful thing about these types of podcasts, which shed light on our life's work. And I hate when someone thinks that their corporate job or being an accountant is their life's work. That's not your fucking life's work. Your life's work and the 2 babies that are sleeping inside of your house.
Great.
The beautiful thing about these things is it actually is what the world needs right now. And that is a conversation around empathy.
Yeah.
And probably you're going to have 100 people that come on this podcast, and they're all going to have a very different take, and they're all going to be great parents, but like, they're all going to have this undertone belief system. If they're deep in it, like, wow, it's crazy hard. But, oh my God, don't I love doing it?
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. I mean, it is a really incredible opportunity to be able to have this conversation. You are for sure preaching to the choir, to say the least. But we appreciate your insight so much. And I do think that when more men are able to have these conversations, feel comfortable in having these conversations, and comfortable in facing themselves the way that you do and so many men do, I think we're on like a great road to next generation parenting is going to be pretty epic, if you ask me.
And we hope that the parents at Joy, the members at Joy who hopefully are listening to this, realize and expand the way that they think of their own role as a mom or as a dad, and think about their family, as Michael said, as a craft, as your life's work. And we hope that you use Joy, you use Maple, and these tools in your toolbox to help you become your best self. And so we thank you so much, Michael.
And moms who are listening, who might be feeling something similar to what I'm feeling, which is like, there are so many men who need to hear this conversation. Share it with them. These kind of conversations are so important. Fatherhood is essential as it gets. And we need the dads as much as we need the moms. So thank you so much, Michael. We like to wrap up our episodes with like a little funny, like yapping about fatherhood.
It's like a slogan. It's like a summary.
Where the coffee is cold, but the parenting tips are hot.
Oh, I see.
So it's like fatherhood, where
Is this maybe the bloopers reel?
yeah. What about yapping about fatherhood, where the hottest dads are the empathetic ones?
Nice.
I like that one. Move the ball.
Right. You did it. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.